Good evening, everyone. We are now in chapter 14 of the book of Leviticus. This is actually the second chapter with regards to the Negazara, which is the leprous sore. And this time round, we'll be focusing on the leper or the person who has contracted leprosy. So we begin in chapter 14. It starts with, and then after chapter 13, and then Jehovah spoke to Moshe, saying this, that this shall be the Torah. This is his rule of the leper for the day of his cleansing. Now, this is important because this word leper here is Mazorah. Mazorah. It comes from the same word as Zorah or Zara. This word is Metzora. It's an adaptation of the word Zara, which is the leprous sore. And the person who is contracted leprosy is called a leper. And so this is the person. This is not the disease. A leprous person can also come to the point where he is actually healed of his leprosy. And when he is healed of his leprosy, he will no longer be required to be unclean. And so remember, our entire presentation of chapter 13 and 14 with regards to the skin disease is to make sure a person is taher. That means he would be clean or pure. Tameh, on the other hand, would be unclean. So when a person contracts leprosy and it doesn't heal and it's confirmed that he has, yesterday we saw that he has to go and tell people that he is unclean, unclean, and he has to stay out of the camp by himself. And we saw that in King Uriah, and we also saw that he has to stay by himself, and his quarantine is in the way shut away from the camp. And so no other people can actually go near him. Very easy to contract, and by mistake could actually be contaminated. And so we're talking about that person, and that person is cleaned, meaning he has been healed. But when he is healed, whether he is clean or unclean, remember we said, whatever we are reading in chapters 13, 14, and then 15 with regards to the Nega Zara would be the fact that the priest, the Kohanim, are the guardians of God's temple, of God's tabernacle, of God's house. And they will determine only the clean can come. And so a clean person can come when they have determined that this person is not contracting something unclean. But leprosy is considered unclean, and so the leper is staying outside the camp by himself. But when he is healed, then he has to be inspected from a state of unclean tameh to become a state of clean taher so that he can come to make his offering. Otherwise, he would not. Now, the role of the priest is not to heal. The role of the priest is to determine unclean or clean, and thereby be able to determine whether a person can actually come into the tabernacle. Now, in chapter 14, it begins that this person is in a day of cleansing, means he has been healed of leprosy. If he is healed of leprosy, he must be brought to the priest. It is not anyone who say that he is clean. Now, in this case, if he has to be brought to the priest is inside the camp. He is staying outside the camp. When a person is unclean of leprosy, he is always living outside the camp. So, how can he meet the priest? And so, in verse 3, and the priest shall go out of the camp to meet him, and the priest shall examine. Examine means to look at him, see him, observe clearly, and indeed, and in verse 3, and indeed, if the uh, Nega Zara, which is the leprosy, is healed, that he is okay now in the person who has leprosy. So now remember, this is Nega Zara, and the leper is a Metzora. The priest shall command to take for him who is to be cleansed, meaning to move from an unclean to a clean state. There is a ritual. So the command is for a ritual to take place. If the ritual doesn't take place, then he will never be declared clean, even though he is healed. So he is to be purified, and in this case, purified in a sense of ritual. He has to bring with him two living birds. In verse 4, there are two living birds, and they must be clean birds. You see, when we say two birds, it's not enough because he could be bringing two eagles or two buzzards, but two living and clean birds, which we saw in Leviticus chapter 11, the ones that they can eat. But in this case, they are also by tradition, by tradition, a specific species. It is not said here, but it is by their oral tradition, because you need to then determine what kind of bird, how big the bird, male or female, what particular type of bird. The second thing he has to bring is cedar wood, a stick. I think a stick is the idea. And then he has to bring scarlet. Now, this word scarlet is a scarlet or crimson wool. Crimson wool. A piece of wool. The reason being is that scarlet color is actually obtained from a worm. And the crimson wool, the red color wool, represents a worm. And the final piece here is a hyssop, a very common grass-like type of weed that is representing humility. And so these are to be told that he has to bring. And with this, the priest will do the rest of the work. The priest will command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. Running water would be spring water. Spring water or flowing water. As opposed to a mikvah, which is in a tank or a hole somewhere where it is stagnant. Earthen vessel means that it is a bowl or a pot that is made of earth, made of dirt. The first one is to be killed. So, according to tradition as well, oral tradition, how to be killed, all this has to be understood. The reason why we are only reading this on a high level is because It is not intended for the one who is reading this to do. It is for the Kohen to do, which means that they have more instruction from oral tradition than we would ever have from reading the text. The first bird is killed, and when it's killed, obviously you need to maintain and contain the blood. The living bird, he shall take it and then use the cedar stick and the crimson wool and the hyssop and dip them and the living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. And he shall sprinkle it 7 times on him who is to be cleansed from leprosy. This is the guy here. Him who is to be cleansed from leprosy. The Mazorah who has been healed. Again, notice it's the number 7 coming to play again. And shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the living bird loose in the open field, not into the sea, not into the desert, but into the open field. This is similar to the idea of the 2 goats for Yom Kippur or Yom Kippurim. And same thing here, 2 birds, kill one, let go the other. In Yom Kippur, 2 goats, kill one and let go the other into the wilderness. Now, he who is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, shave off all his hair, and immerse himself in mikveh. Immerse. This is immersion. Himself in water, that he may be clean. So the idea is to make him clean, to pronounce him clean. After that, he is to come back into the camp, but he shall stay outside his tent 7 days. But on the 7th day, he shall shave off all the hair off his head, his beard, and his eyebrows. All his hair he shall shave off. Everything on the head. He will immerse his clothes, immerse his body in water, and he shall be clean. So remember, this is immerse. The idea of washing is always immerse. Immerse clothes, immerse body. And then he will be considered clean. This is a ritual. Verse 10. After the 7th day, which is on the 8th day, he will take 2 male lambs. Male lambs will be ram. Without blemish, and remember, all offerings to God must be perfect, without blemish. 1 female lamb of the first year without blemish. This would be a she lamb, right? A female of the first year without blemish. So 2 males, 1 female, 3 tenths of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. Then the priest who makes him clean, that same priest who went to inspect him, shall present the man who is to be made clean. He is not yet clean, but he will be soon enough after the ritual is completed. And those things before Jehovah at the door of the tabernacle of the meeting. And the priest shall take 1 male lamb and offer it as a trespass offering. The ritual requires the asham to be given and the log of oil, and wave them as a wave offering before God. Then he shall kill the lamb in the place where he kills the sin offering and the burnt offering. Now, here we have two more offerings that's being described: sin offering, burnt offering in a holy place. Bear in mind that he has made his asham. This is actually the second offering. The first offering is always the khatat, but the khatat is always mentioned after the asham because of the order of importance. He would have to do both the asham and the khatat, and finally the olah, which is the third offering. And so we have here the three offerings: the khatat, the asham, and the olah being discussed in a holy place. And definitely, it tells us the sin offering is the priest, so is the trespass offering. What that means is whatever is remaining belongs to the priest. It is not to be taken back. Only the olah is shared between the offerer and the priest. Now, you don't find the description of how to do all these things because it's already been described in chapter 1 and chapter 4 as well. Chapter 1, chapter 4, and then chapter 5. It says, "This is most holy. The priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, the asham, and he will put it on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, on the big toe of his right foot." Very similar to what is being described in the cleansing of the priests. "And the priest shall take some of the log of oil, pour it onto a palm of his own left hand. The priest shall dip his right finger in the oil that is in his left hand, sprinkle some of the oil on his with his finger 7 times before Jehovah. The rest of the oil in his hand, the priest shall put some of the tip of the right ear of him to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, on the big toe of his right foot, and on the blood of the trespass offering, the asham." Now, with this, it is going through the ritual. I hope that you understand that we have already gone through Leviticus chapters 1 to 7 earlier on, and it's all repeating some of those items. We continue in verse 18. It says, "The rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand he shall put on the head of him who is to be cleansed." Notice this is an anointing. Who is this to be cleansed? Would be the leper who has come to make the offering. And it's told to us that the priest shall make atonement for him. Now, verse 18, the idea of make atonement is to make kafar, a covering, for whatever he has gone through with regards to his leprosy. This is a ritual to clean leprosy. This is a very important position to be in, because without doing this, his atonement would not be done. The atonement is to cover for the zara that made him unclean. And so once their anointing of the oil is done over his head, then he would have made the final covering, because without the anointing, there is no atonement. It is the oil that's being used for the atonement for him before the Lord in this particular case. Verse 19, "The priest shall offer the khatat, the sin offering. Then the sin offering is also used to make atonement for him who is to be cleansed from his uncleanness." Another covering. So there is two atonements, rituals, two parts of it, and two different times. One is the oil of anointing, And then the sin offering, then his sins are atoned. Now, by sins here, it's not about moral, it's about whatever has caused him to be unclean, and thereby he would be cleansed from his uncleanness, to move from a tameh to a taher. Afterward, he shall kill the burnt offering. Now, the burnt offering is important now because the burnt offering is a thanksgiving offering, the olah. After the ritual is done, the atonement is made, you can now come to God by giving a thanksgiving. And the priest shall offer the olah and the mincha on the altar. And so the priest shall make atonement again for him, and this is the covering, to take his place to cover all the uncleanness. And this is a third atonement. And he shall be clean. Now, in verse 21, we also realize that for the sin offering, there was a variableness. And so here, there is also a variableness. If he is unable, now the verse 21 says, if he is poor, this is dull. If he is lowly, he is unable to afford this. He cannot provide by his hand. Then he shall take one male lamb as a trespass offering to be waived, to make atonement for him. This is a variation. The trespass offering for an atonement, 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a mincha. This is a mincha. First, the trespass offering, then the mincha, the grain offering, a log of oil, and 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, as he is able to afford by the hand. One shall be sin offering for the bird, and the other a burnt offering. See, God is a fair God. When the male sheep is very expensive, so just bring one, right? One male lamb. Then the rest can be birds. He shall bring them to the priest on the 8th day of his cleansing, that is, after he has shaven, to the door of the tabernacle of meeting before the Lord. The priest shall take the lamb of the trespass offering and the log of oil and wave it as a wave offering before the Lord. Then he shall kill the lamb of the trespass offering, and the priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering and put it on the tip of the right ear for him to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. Why is this required? Because there is a need for the blood of a male lamb, right? The blood of the male lamb is used to symbolize the ritual of cleansing. Verse 26. And then the priest shall pour some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand, sprinkle with his right finger some of the oil that is in his left hand 7 times before Jehovah. The priest shall put some of the oil that is in the hand on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the place of the blood of the trespass offering, the asham. The rest of the oil that's in the priest's hand shall put on the head of him who is to be cleansed, to make atonement for him before the Lord. This is important because the anointing still has to be done. This is the anointing. And so the anointing also provides for the atonement. Then he shall offer one of the turtle doves or pigeons as he can afford by his hand, such that he is able to afford one as a khatat, a sin offering, the other as an olah, together with a mincha. Even if you're poor, you still need to fulfill the process of the rituals, because without fulfilling the rituals, then this leper will never be declared clean. His sins will not be atoned. His uncleanness is still there in the sight of God, even though he is healed. So the priest shall make atonement for him who is to be cleansed before the Lord. This is the Torah for one who has a leprous sore. Now, this idea of a leprous sore is nega zara. We have been seeing this word. The person who has the leprous sore is called a metzora. And this is for the one who is poor, that he can't do the usual ritual. In this next passage, after they have dealt with the Mizora, the leper, the person who has contracted the Negazora, the leprous sore, they have to deal with his dwelling. Why? Because he's been there for a long time. He's been touching a lot of things. And because in those days, they used wood to do many things. And wood is considered a live uh, piece of equipment that is used for the house, besides the earth. And so it is important then to make sure that the things that he has touched, particularly those that came from a live object like a tree, be specifically examined. Verse 33 says, and then Jehovah spoke to Moshe and Aaron. Now, this is for Aaron to do the examination, saying, when you have come into the land of Canaan, and I give you possession, and I put the leprous plague. Now, in verse 34, the leprous plague is the Nega Zara. The Nega Zara. In a house in the land of your possession, meaning when it was already distributed to all the tribes, and he who owns a house comes and tells the priest, saying, it seems to me that there is some plague in the house. What does that mean? Now, in verse 35, it says, it seems to me that there is some, this word plague is nega. There is some nega in the house. Something is happening, but we're not sure exactly what it is. Remember, why is the priest called to attend to this? Is because whoever is in the house can be contaminated. And so they need to deal with the house before it contaminates the rest of the people. So it says here, the priest shall command that they empty the house. The idea here to empty the house literally means to clear the house, to clear it up, to put everything away. And when they do that, then the priest only will go in to examine the nega, and all that is in the house may not be made unclean, so that there is no contamination. So this idea here is that the things in the house may not be contaminated. Afterward, the priest shall go in, observe carefully the house, He observes the plague. And indeed, if the plague is on the walls of the house with ingrained streaks, greenish or reddish, these are all observations. It is a plague. It has streaks. It's greenish. It's reddish. It's on the walls of the house. It's made of wood, which appears. Notice, which appear means it's viewed, right? It is seen by sight. It's visual. To be deep in the wall. Now, the idea of deep in the wall is that it is depressed in the wall. Now, remember yesterday when we were looking at the Negazara, and the priest will observe it on the skin, and they will check whether it is gone under the skin. Here it's checking whether it's gone under the surface of the wall. And then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house, shut up the house 7 days. Same ritual. If you suspect something, give it 7 days to see whether it has turned into something very wrong. And the priest shall come again on the seventh day. Look. Now, by way of explaining, let me just explain this to you. When it says 7 days, it is 1, 2, and then 7. On the seventh day would be here. That 7 days includes the day of examination. You see this often in the Bible, like in the book of Esther, when Esther said that they will all fast for 3 days and 3 nights. But on the third day, she got ready and went to meet the king. Same thing here, 7 days. And then on the seventh day, the priest will come. And indeed, if the plague had spread on the walls of the house, it's like the hand of the person. If it has spread it, there is danger. Then the priest shall command that they take away the stones in which the plague is, and they shall cast them in an unclean place outside the city. Unclean in the sense that nobody will go and touch it, whether wood or stone, and in this case, the stone on the walls. And he shall cause the house to be scraped inside all around, and the dust that they scrape off shall pour into the same unclean place outside the city. What are they doing? They are trying to remove this particular plague. Now, some people will call this mildew or whatever that may be. These are spores that's growing that is very dangerous. And then they shall take other stones and put in place of those stones that they have taken out, and he shall take other mortar and plaster the house, so that this growth is no longer there. Verse 43. Now, after they have cleaned the house, removed some of the stones, scraped everything off, scraped off the plaster, replaster, if the plague comes back, if the nega comes back and breaks out in the house after he has taken away the affected stones, after he has scraped the house off the walls, after it has been replastered, then the priest shall come and look. Notice all the priest does is to look. Why? Because his job is to make sure that one is tame or taher. That's his job. His job is not to heal. His job is not to repaint. His job is to define and pronounce. And indeed, if the plague has spread in the house, it is an active leprosy in the house. It is tame, unclean. Now, understand that this is Zara. In the house there is Zara. which means that it can easily contaminate anyone who comes in contact. And then he shall break down the house, its stones, the wood, the plaster, and he shall carry them outside to the city to an unclean place where nobody will go. Now, the priest has this unenviable job to destroy somebody's home because this home is declared unclean and unfit for occupancy because anyone who dwells in it can be contaminated. Moreover, he who goes into the house at all while it is shut up shall be unclean until evening. Very similar to Leviticus 11, when they have touched the carcass of an unclean animal, the person will be unclean until evening. He's unclean for the day, really. And he who lies down or sleeps in the house shall wash his clothes. Again, this word wash, immerse. And he who eats in the house shall immerse his clothes. This house shall be quarantined and nobody shall go in. But if they do, then they must be going through a ritual to clean themselves. This is the ritual regarding the house. And we shall see the final part in verse 48. Verse 48 says this: but if the priest comes in and observes, look at it very closely, it is important for us to realize, and oftentimes I've repeated so much, that it's all about looking. But this looking is careful observation, not to touch it. And indeed, the plague has not spread in the house after the house was plastered, then the priest shall pronounce the house taher. This is a pronouncement. Remember, the house doesn't become clean just because somebody said so. The house becomes clean because you have cleaned it. But in the eyes of God, from the ritual of God's perspective, has to go through the ritual for the pronouncement, because if the priest does not pronounce it clean, it will remain unclean in the eyes of God. The house may have been fixed. The plague of the leprosy is no longer there. Nothing is growing, replastered, remodeled, replaced. But it is necessary for the priest to make that pronouncement. That is the role of the priest. And once he makes the pronouncement, the reason being because the plague is healed. There's no more plague. The viruses are already gone. Whatever is spreading there is no longer. And then he shall take to cleanse the house, another ritual, 2 birds, cedar stick, crimson wool. Remember, a crimson wool, it represents the worm because the scarlet color comes from a worm, and a hyssop plant. And then he shall kill one of the birds in an earthen vessel over running water, very similar to the cleansing of the Metzora, the leper. And he shall take the cedar stick, the hyssop, the crimson wool, the living bird, and dip them in the blood of the slain bird and in the water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. It's a ritual. In the case of the Metzora, it's sprinkled towards the Metzora, the one who is to be clean. And he shall cleanse the house with the blood of the bird and the running water and the living bird with the cedar stick, the hyssop, and the crimson wool. Notice The ritual is to sprinkle the blood 7 times. It's to clean the house. Now, the blood is used to clean the house from a ritual, right? From a ritual. It doesn't clean it of Zara because it would have been dealt with earlier on. So, this is very much a ritual where is God, through the Kohanim, declares it clean, that it will be clean. And then he shall let the living bird loose outside the city in the open field and make atonement for the house, and it shall be clean. And so here we have a covering. Do not think that atonement is always for a person. It is for utensils, it is for the house here that is made clean. So you need to cover it by ritual of the letting loose the second bird, just like in the Yom Kippur, letting loose the second goat. But the atonement of the house is similar also to Yom Kippur. That if you read the beginnings of Leviticus 16 later on, you find that the atonement for the utensils of the temple or the tabernacle has to be done by blood. The cleansing and the covering of the utensils, the altar, and the wash basin. All of these are part and parcel of the annual cleansing ritual. We come to the last passage. The last passage reads this way: This is the Torah for any leprous sore and scale. This is the Torah. The Torah is the instruction for the Nega Zara, also for the nut tag, right? A nut tag. It is a boil or a scab, something that is uh, inflamed, right? Inflamed. For the leprosy of a garment and of a house, for a swelling and a scab and a bright spot, to teach when it is unclean, that is tameh, and when it is clean, that is taher. This is the law of leprosy. This is the Torah of Zara. So in chapters 13 and 14, there is an extremely detailed and very long 2 chapters to deal with something which is very important to the community. I would suggest that the fact that so much is said and so many words used to be written down, and the ritual being so carefully described and more by oral tradition to the priest, is to suggest to us that this is of utmost importance to make sure that within the community there is no zara in whatever form and shape, whether it's on a person, whether it's staying on a person, on the garments, or on the walls, on the stone, in the house, in any form and shape, because it contaminates the person, and the person will not be able to come to God. But worst case is that this really contaminates to affect the hygiene and the health, and it will kill. And so it is something that uh, God has made extreme care for the priests to make sure that it is when the priest says so that the person is clean. When the priest says so, that the house is clean. And all of these are to be taught by the priest to the people of how to immerse, how to wash, how to stay clean, and how to be clean. All the shaving of the hair ritual, all the rituals, and all the offerings to be made is to please God, that these people called the Israelites, the people of God, are obedient to the Torah of God. And by doing so, they will be very different from all the other nations around them. And with this, we come to the end of chapter 14.